You can't handle the truth. You know what? You're not ready to scale your real estate portfolio. And I'll give you 7 reasons why you're not. I'm Erik Stenbakken, and I am one of the Real Estate Pessimist Podcast co-hosts. Join Kristi and I as we talk about 7 reasons why you might not be ready to scale yet.
Welcome to the Real Estate Pessimist Podcast. I'm your co-host, Kristi Kandel today, and I've been a real estate developer for nearly 20 years, as well as a real estate investor and property manager. And I'm joined today with my co-host.
That was a pretty good introduction for a pessimistic sounding podcast. We'll get to why that's actually not pessimistic. But my name is Erik Stenbakken, and I've been a real estate investor since 2010 in single family homes and luxury STRs. And Kristi and I have both learned a lot of things. We know that it is not always sunny or money. And today, I don't want you to take this as an insult, right? I just want to just right out of the gate. I don't want you to feel that we're insulting you, but you might not be as ready as you think you are. Kristi, take us away.
Yeah, so today we're going to go through the 7 reasons you should not scale your real estate portfolio. And these are all things that we want to help make sure you have a solid foundation so that when you are ready, you'll know it and you'll do it with confidence. The first one that we have is if you do not have systems in place, you are not ready to scale. And one of the biggest things that I think we're just now finally starting to talk about, Erik, is that real estate is a business. So it doesn't matter if you're managing long-term rentals, short-term rentals, or mid-term rentals. You've got a business that you're managing. And for anyone who has run a company, you know that if you don't have systems and processes in place, then you're not going to be able to effectively manage your company, your employees, your customers, and clients.
But Kristi, I've got one property and I'm managing it and it's doing fine. What possibly could go wrong if I just go from 1 and I just do it 17 times and then I got 18? It's the same thing, right?
Sure, it's the same headache 6, 7, 8, 20 times. One of the good ways to really understand where your weaknesses might be is if you just take a week and you document everything you do with that property in that week. You're going to start to see the tenant texted me 3 times. So that means you don't have a platform to manage your tenants. If you had a maintenance request because you had a leaky faucet, did you have to go search and find a contractor and go through 6 or 7 different people just to get someone to the property? Those are some of the nuances that you might not realize are taking a lot of your time. And then when you scale, that's when you realize systems are broken.
Right. If you took those 3 texts and you said, oh, that's not a big deal. Well, if you took those 3 texts times 18, well, then you got to ask yourself, well, how am I going to keep track of that? They said, oh, the sink is leaking a little bit. It's just a slow drip. So it's not an emergency, which is the kind you lose track of. And you're like, oh, how would I keep that separate from the other 17 units if I had 17 going on? Well, if you've only got 1 faucet and it's dripping, you know which one it is, and you know who the tenant is, and you know who to call back. But if you got 17 of them and you realize, wait, if I actually did have 18 of these, how in the world would I keep that straight? That's what Kristi's talking about here. She's talking about systems, because what works for one, I'm just going to right out say it, doesn't necessarily work for 18. You think it's just the same thing times 18, but it isn't, because what got you here won't get you there, which, by the way, is a great book.
That is a great quote. Why don't we maybe jump into some of the tools we use to manage ours, just to because I often get the question, people go, okay, I hear I'm supposed to have systems and processes. What are systems and processes? With my properties, we use a combination of things of technology and automation. For any property and any unit that is a long-term rental, we ended up using Tenant Cloud. So that way our tenants get logged into there. They can connect their bank account, or they could pay with a credit card of their monthly rent. They submit maintenance requests through that platform, and they communicate with us through that platform completely. Within that, each property then, we've put in there, what are the paint colors on the walls? What are the appliances in the units? What are the dimensions of these things? So if someone's stove is broken, we don't need to spend multiple trips going out to measure to see what type of appliance was there. We know immediately what it is, so we can go replace it. And it's something that you maybe don't have all at once and from the start, but you build that over time. And then for our short-term rentals, we use a combination of our in-house project management software that we built, which anybody can. We use Rike, but there's Monday.com, there's Asana. And then within that, you could build out any systems and processes along with using Airbnb, VRBO, and those platforms. What about you, Eric?
Oh, we use a combination of Evernote just to keep track of things. I kind of have a house history. The other day, we had our handyman changing smoke alarm batteries. And I was so incredibly annoyed to find out I did not have a note for that property as to how many smoke alarms we had that were battery powered and what size batteries they took, because that should have been in there, right? And it was easy to take care of, but that's a note in there, right? So we've got, each house has all kinds of details about it in there. But for our short-term rentals, because we have more of those, we use an automated platform. We use OwnerRez. And people say, well, what about guest communication? 90% of guest communication happens, the robots do it. I mean, literally. Now, I'm going to explain a little bit. We have written the responses. So when they make an inquiry, we'll say, something goes out as an initial message. And then when they book, something else goes out to say, here's the next steps for you to do. Those are not things that require a personal touch. Now, anytime somebody has an actual question about a property or about something else, we handle that personally, right? Which is a thing you have to watch. I mean, I can do that for the number of properties that we have, but I could not do that if I was managing 45 properties. There's just no way I can answer every single individual question. So we do a combination of basically just a data set on each property, a system that handles a lot of automated things, the payments, the forwarding of the codes. Okay, perfect example is that we use a combination of software through OwnerRez and internet connected locks, so that if you booked my property, it is going to automatically assign a brand new code to my house that gets sent to you, not to anybody else. It becomes active only 30 minutes before you log in, before you check in. It expires 30 minutes after you check out. I don't set that manually. Like, the robots take care of all of that stuff, and it's custom. Now, there's work to set it up, but in the long run, wow, that pays dividends. So that's an example of systems that we use that are necessary, really, for our own sanity.
Those are such good tips, and those are the lessons learned. I'm still chuckling about the batteries, because you will learn to have batteries of every kind in every property, and you will not even realize how many battery types are out there. It's crazy. But, and I'll say this, we did not start out this way. It started with a Google Doc for us, and we then built our systems on top of it as we realized we could not keep that up. That was not happening. And it sounds like, Eric, same for you. Start small, guys. Document what you do repetitively, right, and then you can create a process from it on a Google Doc. And then as it evolves, then maybe integrate software. But definitely start by building the systems from the start. So whether you're using AI, whether you're using technology or a person, they know how to do it, how you would want it managed.
Right. So last tip on the scaling, I was in the airport flying back from a real estate convention talking about short-term rentals. And somebody sitting next to us before we boarded the plane had this little tiny thing, looked like a tackle box. And it was clear. It was maybe 2 inches thick and maybe, 10 by 12 inches or something like that. But you know what? I could see through it. And it was a little tackle box full of every single kind of battery that they make, every single size. And I was like, that's a real estate investor right there. She'd been visiting. And I was like, what a great idea. She's got every conceivable size of battery, because guess what? You're going to need it. And that's just an example of scale. If you've got one, hey, no problem. But if you're visiting a bunch of properties, you're just going to need it.
So true. All right. So what's number 2?
Well, I hate to tell you, but you're not ready to scale because you don't have enough cash reserves. You probably don't. You're ready to go in. You've calculated, this is how much I need to buy. I need to have this much down, and I'll do the bare minimum of whatever the lending says that I have to have, and then I'm going to buy it, and then I'm going to cash back up. I'm going to cash up. I mean, how many times have you heard that little phrase? Well, guess what? You shouldn't be scaling until you are already cashed up. Now, the short answer is, how much money do I need, right? That's the first thing. Well, how much money do I need? Well, I'll give you some basic guidelines, but the best answer that I've heard was from Ashley Kerr, and it's like, whatever's going to help you sleep at night, right? But ignorance is bliss. And guess what? I do not want you to be blissful in this category, because if you're blissful and ignorant and something does happen, it can knock you out, and you want to stay in the game. So the reason that more properties requires more depth of cash is because there are just more things to go wrong. Because, if you've got a single family home, you've got one or maybe two, what are the chances really that both roofs need replaced at the same time that your HVAC system goes out? At the same time that you have a major storm come through? It's just, that's not very likely. But guess what? If you've got 50 homes, 150 homes, that stuff can happen. There was a real estate investor that I heard on a podcast quite a while back. He owned 150 homes in the same market, and a storm had come through and a tornado took out 50 homes. I maybe get the numbers a little bit wrong, but it was close to a third of his portfolio in one go. So what happens if you don't have any cash reserves? You are sunk, right? You are sunk. But he had cash reserves. He had played it conservatively. He was able to, quite literally, weather the storm, right? It's a general rule of thumb, 6 to 12 months of operating expenses per property. Now, I'm going to add a little caveat to that, is that at some point when your portfolio scales, one side of the portfolio can help support the other. And again, this is a little more complicated than it might seem. That's if you have your properties spread out. If you've got all 64 units at the same address, your risk of having something significant happen, let's say from a weather event or fire these days, is way higher than if you've got 16 over here and 16 over here and 16 over here and 16 in another town, right? You've spread out your risk. And so all of those things kind of come into play, because if you've got your risks spread out, it's very possible that part A of your portfolio can help you rescue part B in the case of an emergency. But there's nothing like cash in the bank. So if you've got to bring in a big mitigation crew and clean up after a storm or something like that, that you've got the cash to actually do that. Or if for some reason you're not able to rent and the income for whatever reason just drops to zero on there, you have a way to back that up. That's generally a risk. I'll tell you a little story of when you don't have enough cash reserves. We were renting, we had an open house at our property, and a group of renters came in, and this is in a college town, they're university kids. And they said, "We really love your property. And I like them too." Said, "Hey, I think this is going to work out." And they said, if you could lower the rent by $20, then we could afford it." And I stopped them. I said, "You know what? I like you so much. I will not lower the rent for you because you should not be renting this property. I would be glad to lower the rent. It wasn't about the $20. No problem. I could lower the rent $20 and get good tenants. I'd be happy about that. But I would be putting them at terrible risk." And I said to them, "What happens if one of you misses a shift at work? What happens if somebody gets laid off for even a week? Then it will sink you all." I said, "The best thing I can possibly do for you is tell you you're not ready for this property. Save up your money, get better jobs, and come back later when you can afford it, because you are way too close to the brink, and any kind of disaster will sink you." You can read Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money. Good book, very different than you would expect. And in that book, he points out that there is always a black swan event. People are like, "Oh, no. I'm good. I'm all set up unless there's a black swan event." Who could predict that? And his point is, we know there's going to be a black swan event. We know there will be. We just don't know what it's going to be. Will it be a crazy wildfire? Will it be, I don't know, Kristi, back-to-back hurricanes? Kristi's laughing because that happened to her. Will it be a global pandemic? Will it be political upheaval? You don't know what's going to happen, but something will happen, and we want you to be ready.
Exactly. We are going through this right now. We have an entity that has a couple properties in it. And in the single family home, unfortunately, one of the older tenants had passed away. And the person who remained decided that she wasn't going to take the money to pay the rent. So we went through an eviction for a couple of months, left it as a hoarder's house, had to clean it out, paint it, get it ready. That was a property we actually were in the process of listing to sell because it had hit the metrics that we wanted. So it was time to move on to another property. Now we're 4 months in with no rent plus eviction costs. But because we have reserves, we're still good on that property. And then we have an extra safety net because another property in that same entity and same partnership group has extra reserves as well. And meanwhile, at the same time, the water main busted under the concrete slab, so that could potentially cost us $10,000. And we also wanted to remodel a kitchen in one of the units. What we did is we vetted the water main issue and found out it didn't actually bust and there was a cheaper fix. We put the kitchen remodel on hold because that was a want to do something, not a need to. So that way we have an extra cushion of reserves if for some reason it takes longer to sell the other house. And it just gives you so much peace of mind when the big ticket items come that you go, hey, we've got it covered. And out west, we've got a fourplex that had a similar issue. We needed to replace the roof because a tree fell on it in a winter storm. And at the same time, the furnace goes out for one of our tenants. So, but because we had enough reserves in that property, we could afford to pay $10,000 for a roof and we could afford to pay $8,000 to put in a new furnace. Having those reserves, I can tell you, and having those go-to contractors gives you so much peace of mind that it allows you to scale and be okay when bad things happen.
So it sounds like with all this stuff going on, because if you have enough properties, hey, here's the good news, bad news, there's always something going on. Right? You just hear the part on the podcast like, oh, I got 17 doors in 17 weeks and I'm a set. What the follow-up there, because there isn't a follow-up on this, is that, oh, now my problems have multiplied. It sounds like with all the stuff going on here, Kristi, you didn't do this work all by yourselves. What's the next point?
Our third point is that you are not ready to scale if you do not have a strong team or network around you. In every company that I run, it's all about building that team because real estate, investing, development, it's a team sport. And no, on those properties, it wasn't that it was me scrambling to find different people. We used our current teams of contractors that we have set for each market and reached out to them with each issue that happened in the different states. One of our go-to contractors was immediately at the property and then realized, oh, wait, I can't fix this because I'm not a plumber. So you're going to need the plumber to come out and do the water main, but it's not a major issue. Or with the furnace, another contractor came out and he said, it might be the valve that's broken, but I don't know how to fix it. So we had our other contractor come and he realized it was above his pay grade. He couldn't fix it. So immediately then we reach out to our network of local HVAC companies, get the first bid, and it came in for like $12,000, which is ridiculous for a furnace only, no matter where you are in the country. That should be more like $3,000 to $6,000. But we had multiple contractors immediately come out, do the evaluation. We were able to compare quotes and pick the best one, not necessarily the cheapest, but the best one who has been the best partner for us. When you're building your team and thinking, who are the players that need to be involved? In each market, my go-to list, and Erik, yours might be a little different depending on the types of properties you have and how you manage them. But our go-to is that we want 2 handymen that are really good at everything, including plumbing. Maybe electrical, they're a little iffy on, but we want 2 go-to contractors who can do most things that break. Then we always have an electrician in a market. If something's going to go wrong and it's electrical, that could create a much bigger issue. That's very key, especially if you have short-term rentals, to immediately fix a problem. We always have a handful of cleaners because we do have our short-term and mid-term rentals. Think about all the things in a property that are high-ticket items, and then have those on your roster and build the relationship early before you need them. Say, hey, I'm an investor in your market. I own multiple properties in these areas. I'm really looking for go-to people. So when the roof needs replaced, when the windows need replaced, when the water heater goes bad and needs fixed, you've already started building that relationship with them.
Yeah. And you need to be proactive about that because some things are just not obvious. One of the things Kristi mentioned that I wouldn't want you to miss is that you need more than one, and you need more than one good one for each category. Okay. We had a situation with plumbing, and it was a big one. We had to replace part of a sewer line. And the first plumber who went out, he never got me a bid. He did the initial emergency resolution of the thing, but to fix it, he never got back to me and never got back to me and never got back to me. So I called somebody else on our list, and they gave me a bid of, I think it was $7,000. It ended up being closer to $9,000. I thought, that is not good. Well, we'll call the third stringer that we have used also in other things. And they came in and gave me a bid for under $2,000 to do the same job, right? If I had only had one person in that category to call, I would, I'd be sunk. If I only had 2, I would have paid about $9,000. But because I had 3, I went down the list and that third person, and we ended up getting it done for $1,900. So having a team that you work with, and this comes with time, it comes with some experience, but building a team is really important. As we exit this point, one of the big deals about scaling and having a team is you're going to have to be spending money like you have not spent before. The idea of just dropping $10,000 to solve one problem, $20,000, we got to handle this. I had a friend of mine, his portfolio, he had a multifamily. He got a bill from his electrician, $50,000 to work on his problem. So if you can't get your head around writing a check for that kind of number and shoving it across the desk, you might not be ready. Well, we're talking about money. Number 4, you're not ready because your debt strategy is messy, right? The podcast talk about just get the money, and it could be OPM, other people's money. It's like, it's so great. You just get other people's money. Well, when you've got other people's money, now you have an extra set of problems, because not only do you have the problem you have to deal with, but you have somebody else's money that you're dealing with. And there are all kinds of extra strings that go with dealing with other people's money. And I'm not just talking about raising money, but if you go just borrow it. Borrowing money is part art and part science. And it is a thing that needs study. It's a thing that needs practice. The idea of scale, leverage, that works awesome until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, guess what? It can crush your dreams. It can crush your portfolio. It can literally put you out of business, and it could put you in very hot water depending on how you got that money, right? So there's all kinds of things people will talk about. It's like, you can just go get hard money. You can just go get private money. You just go to a bank, go to a local bank. That's the hot thing right now. It's like, just go to a local bank because they'll give you the money. Well, yeah, guess what? They will probably be more likely to give you money than, let's say, Wells Fargo, because they know their local market. But guess what? Your local bank still wants their money back. There's kind of this idea that, there's this sweet banker and they're going to give me the money. That sweet banker also wants their money back. And you have to have a plan for how that's going to happen. You need to know the lingo. You need to know what DSCR is and what your DSCR is likely to be. And when it comes to banks and when it comes to lending, they're not all the same. So what one institution will tell you, no, that can't be done. Because here's the thing, most people won't say, no, I can't do it. What they'll say is, that can't be done, because then it gives them a pass, right? Well, when it comes to lending and so on, most of the time it's, no, we don't want to do it. Or our committee won't let us do that. Or we've already written enough loans in that category, and now for this year, we can't write any more on that category. There's 100 different reasons why you might not get approved somewhere. And I want to throw this out here to you. If you go to a lender and they are reluctant to lend to you on a particular deal, that could be one of the most awesome, best things that happens to you. Okay, think about this. If you're ready to scale from 2 to 20, just making those numbers up, and you go to a lender and you say, hey, I found this multifamily. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to do it. Here's what my income's going to be. Here's what my expenses are. And you pass it over the desk to them, and they come back and say, no, we're not going to lend on that. Do not just run away. Do not just say, well, fine, I'll just go to the next bank. Your job at that point is to say, wait, why? I'm curious. What do you see as red flags here? Because guess what? If these people are in your local market, and if this committee does review day after, well, maybe it's once a week, right? But once a week, if they review dozens and dozens of applications for loans, guess what they do? They are professional underwriters, and their job is to get their money back. And if they don't think they're going to get their money back, why should you? Right? You've really got to think about that.
That is such a good point, because your lenders, they're double checking the work that you did. And if they feel comfortable with it and give you a loan, that should make you feel comfortable. If they don't, then find out why. And then maybe there's something else you can do to the deal to then make that work, to get the loan to where you can approve it. What was your example?
We went to get a loan to cash out to solve a problem. Remember, we talked about how to lose $500,000 on one door in a year. It was on that one. And we had to go cash out one property because we had cash reserves, but we did not have $500,000, and we were not anticipating builder fraud. But that's what happened. And we had to go get a lot of money. And we went to get a loan on a place and we thought, oh, this should be no problem. It's got tons and tons of equity. And when they came back and said, we'll only give you 30% loan to value, I thought, what? They're crazy. That's nuts. Why would they not give me more? I mean, 30% loan to value, you guys. And it was them, right? I was blaming them. It was those idiots. And then I sat down and I looked at what my DSCR was currently. And I was like, this looks dim. This is, if I get this loan, my cash flow is going to significantly drop and I had better be careful because the ice is getting thin here. Right. And that red flag that popped up, we got a loan, we got things taken care of, sold the other property, got cash back out, stabilized the thing. Right. But my point is that was a flag. I said, I need to pay attention to that. I need to take a look at this, what's going on here, and use it as a guide, a beacon, instead of just an insult. So pay attention to your debt strategy, talk to bankers, ask them, what would make this a good deal for you? And this is awesome. It is free, high-level mentoring. If you've got a local bank who will look at your little multifamily or your little portfolio that you want to do, and I say little, I mean, maybe 64 units. But if you talk to them and they say, here's why we're not comfortable, you should listen. Because if they say, well, we just don't see the economy going really good here, they might know something that's coming down the road that you don't know.
Such a great point, because they're underwriting all of these other deals and all of these other people in that market. So they know information. They have insider knowledge on that.
Yes, they do. All right, so we've got the things, just some warning signs about getting money. You can get money, but be careful as you do it because people want their money back. Kristi, take us to number 5.
You're not ready to scale if you're still making rookie mistakes. Part of this will go back to the first one with systems and processes in place. But if your systems are broken, those need to be fixed before you scale. So how do you figure that out? Did you get a tenant in and you almost had to evict them? Or maybe they kept paying rent, but they paid it late and they kept paying on the 5th or the 7th and you eventually chased them down. If you had a rehab on a project and you realized, hey, I budgeted $25,000, but it came in at 50. That's significantly more contingency than you should normally have. So take a look at the things that you've done and pause and do a postmortem on each property that you have and that you've invested in, and take inventory of what went right, what went wrong, what could have done better. And that's with your systems, your processes, your teams, your tenants, your contractors. And if you're honest with yourself, you're going to see the things that you should fix before you level up. Because knowledge comes from all the studying that we do and all the reading and all the learning. But the true wisdom and experience comes from taking action. And when we do that, then if we don't take the time to pause and look backwards and see what worked, what didn't work, then we're not going to truly gain and grasp that wisdom.
That's right. It's because these can be expensive. See, we're not offering these to you as insults, right? But I'm coaching some friends through possibly purchasing a short-term rental out of state. And one of the things that they'll come to me and say, I don't know, what do you think about this? Or the real estate agent said that it could earn this much money. I'll look at that. I'll say, no way. There is no way. Because the word on the street is, well, you could buy a property and then you could do a better job, right? You get better photography, you manage it better, all this other stuff, and you could increase the income 10, 20, 50, 100%, no problem. Well, guess what? It matters. And unless you've spent some time looking at things, you won't know the difference. Well, if you're looking at a vacation rental somewhere and the pictures stink and the reviews are kind of bad and it's old furniture, you can go in there and you ask them, like, well, let me see your profit and loss statement. And they give it to you and it's only been rented through one obscure platform. You're like, I can definitely do better than that. But the case that my friend sent to me, he said, I don't know, I think it was earning $75,000 a year gross income. And the projections, that was the magic word. That's where stuff starts getting purple haze and stuff like this. Like we're in pretend land. They said, well, you could probably get $125,000. Like, do you realize the difference between 70 something and 125? And here's the kicker though. This property had good photography. They had good furnishings. They had good listings. They had good reviews. So guess what? They're already at the top of the game for that market. Those numbers, by the way, are looking back on earnings in the last few years were good. Looking forward, you always have to be more conservative. It would be a colossal rookie mistake in this case to take somebody's projections as gospel. If you listen to podcasts and you're like, that's awesome, I'm just going to go do that thing that they told you on a podcast, that's a red light. Okay, that's a red light that just showed up on your dashboard, because guess what part of their story you're hearing? Only the highlights. You're only hearing the good stuff. And you need to have a depth of, if you can't rattle off a half a dozen potential disasters in any given sector, in any given asset class, you're not ready, right? I can't even tell you 2 problems that could happen to you in self-storage. I don't know what the big disasters are. Guess what? I have no business going there. Not yet. Doesn't mean I can't, but I don't know enough yet to go there. Any closers on that rookie mistakes there, Kristi?
But really, just like you said, on social media, not believing what you see, but also if a realtor were to give you something on a property and give you the projections, I always take that at face value and dig deeper. It's not that I don't trust the information they're giving, but their metrics might be different. Their understanding of the market might be different. So I use theirs as, okay, that's a good general. Now I'm going to dig deeper into each of those numbers and put mine behind it and see where it actually lands. So, and you should always conservatively underwrite your projects, plan and do and hope for the best, but conservatively underwrite, because it all comes back to, I want to sleep at night. I don't want to have a business that gives me more gray hair and wrinkles.
Right on. Ready for number 6? You might not be ready to scale yet because you're not sure what game you're playing. Now, this is ironic because obviously you think, well, I'm playing the scaling game. That's why I'm doing this. Guess what? Scaling for the sake of scaling is not the right game. That is actually not the game. The only place that works is when you go to these REI conventions and you can kind of puff up and walk around and go like, I own blank number of doors. And it gives you a little bit of bragging rights. But guess what? I was at the jeweler's getting a watch battery changed, and they had a Rolex counter out there. And it got me to thinking, you know what? Doors don't buy you a Rolex. Money does. And more doors, I'm going to tell it to you straight, does not mean more profit. It just doesn't. This was a rookie mistake of mine. I'm going to admit this. For years, I had made this assumption that more doors meant more profit. And it just doesn't. It can if done right. So don't get me wrong here. But it's not an automatic more doors equals more profit. It just isn't. So back to the original point here. You're not sure what game you're playing, why you're scaling. Here are some of the different games that you can play while you are growing your portfolio or your objectives. And this is really, really important, because if you see somebody that you respect and they go out and buy a property or an asset or something like this, and you think, awesome, well, I'm going to do that too because they're really smart people. They may be smart people and they may be doing really awesome depending on the game they are playing. So let me run through some of these. Real quick, the overview is the tax game, the appreciation game, the value add game, the stabilized wealth preservation game, and last, and probably least, the cash flow game. Well, walk through those real quick. The tax game. You may see somebody buy a property and think, oh, cool, that must be a good market and a good asset class. But what you might not know is the reason that they bought in that asset class and the reason that they overpaid by $100,000 is because they were sheltering $1 million from taxes. It was better for them to overpay by $100,000 in that market and not write a check for $1 million in capital gains, is they were doing a 1031. They had to get out of it, and they bought an asset in this market. And for them, that was a win because they were playing the tax game. And this is what I just call it's invisible money, because it doesn't show up as cash flow. It doesn't really show up necessarily as appreciation. It doesn't go into net worth. It's just saving money, right? But if you save money from paying taxes, that's worth more than earning money, right? Because if you save $1 not paying tax on that, that's better than, I don't know, depending on your tax bracket, $1.20 to $1.90. Because if you make $1.90 and you're in a super high tax bracket and you don't play the tax game well, you're going to pay a huge chunk of that in taxes just to keep $1. So some people are playing the tax game. And if you're playing a different game, for you, that same asset in the same market at the same price would be losing when for them it's winning. Next is the appreciation game. Some people buy with in mind that this is going to be the appreciation play. That's the game they're playing. And that is a game that you win with time. There's been a lot of hype in the last 5 years about real estate making you tons of money. Yes, that is an anomalous time in the real estate investing. You just look it up. It's kind of a wild time. It was great if you were in it, but it would be foolish to assume that it is always going to rise at that level.
And back in 2008, when the real estate market crashed because of the bad loans that were being written and whatnot, I remember people saying, I'm so glad I was able to buy then. And I was always envious of that because I was just entering the workforce. I didn't have money to buy property. And I was like, man, I really wish I could have been around investing in '08. Well, guess what? Eventually, I got into the game and I started buying. And a couple years into that, and I was executing my game and my strategy. A couple years into that, we have a pandemic. And then all of a sudden, real estate goes, and the appreciation is ridiculous on all the properties I have. And now people are sitting on the sidelines going, oh, I missed the boat. I'm never going to own a property. Guys, the only time you miss the boat is if you don't get started. You're going to have the next pandemic, the next market crash, the next something, but you won't be able to benefit in the upside if you stay on the sidelines.
That's right. And people will talk about buying in '08, '09, '10. And one thing I would remind people, because I was starting to buy about then, it was not easy. There were not banks lining up to give you money because they had just lost a ton of money on real estate. So it was not easy. Okay. And also, how many podcasts have you heard talking about like in '06, '07? Ooh, I'm so glad I bought right then because man, it was killing it in '08, '09. Guess what? No, those are the people who wrote the cautionary books about, hey, watch yourself here. Okay. And that's why I stress the appreciation game is played with time. And sometimes these timelines could be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And if somebody is playing a 20-year game and you're playing a 9-month game, you are not playing the same game. Another game to play is the value add game. That's where, you buy a property and you come in, and Kristi does this with her local real estate developers group, which, by the way, we should put in the show notes. It's teaching people how to add value to a property that wasn't there before, right? And you can do this in virtually every asset class. You can buy a thing and fix that thing up, and now that thing is worth more than it was before. That is a different game. Your game for reserves and cash and managing a team and knowing your market and exit strategy is a totally different game than if it's a buy and hold for appreciation. Nothing wrong with any of these. I'm just saying they are different games and you need to know which game you're playing. Another one is wealth preservation. Just stabilize. It's not actually intended to make money. That's crazy. People would buy real estate to not make money. Yeah, sometimes people buy real estate just as a bank because real estate tends to be more stable than a bank. This is especially true in markets where there's a lot of foreign investing. And if you look at foreign money, the inflation can just go nuts. And they're like, you know what I'll do? I'll just buy a property somewhere, park my money there, and it's okay. If I'm only losing $2,000 a month on this unit, that's awesome. Because if I kept it in a bank in my country, I'd be losing $10,000 a month in inflation, costs because of monetary devaluation. So if they're playing that game, just banking their money, and you're like, man, and you're playing a different game, you're like, how are they making money? They're not. They're losing money, and they're happy to do it because they're losing money at such a slower rate than they would somewhere else. Guess what? If that's not the game you're playing, you can't win that. So you just need to play a different game. Last one is cash flow. And that's the one everybody wants to talk about. Oh, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. And I don't have to explain to you what that is, except to say, please be careful because people throw out numbers of their gross earnings all the time. And like, I made $750,000 with this portfolio. Well, what they should have said is, I grossed $750,000 of that, and $400,000 of that went to debt, and $200,000 of that went to maintenance, and $100,000 of that went to taxes. And then that left me with, right? Okay, you see those numbers like shrinking down right there. And so cash flow, I will say for me, is probably the game where I make the least. I do okay with it because STRs tend to be, and I'll have this as a caveat here, STRs that are paid for in a good market that have high income can be good cash flowing. But still, cash flow is probably the way that I have made the least in real estate. How about you, Kristi?
I would agree. Cash flow is a nice byproduct of a couple properties that are short-term rentals in great markets. But for the most part, we talked about in one of the episodes, I got into this because I realized I needed to start playing the tax game. And then by getting in playing the tax game, I started to see the value of taking what I learned in development and applying that to residential properties and doing the value add game and realizing, wait, I can force the appreciation. I can't make the market go up. I can't necessarily get my cash flow exponentially more. But if I'm playing the value add game, I can win in any market based on the purchase and then what I'm adding to that. So yeah, cash flow is a nice byproduct, but we definitely do not count on that.
All right, before we go to number 7 here, I just want to recap these really quickly. The primary games that I see is the tax game, the appreciation game, the value add game, stabilized wealth preservation, and the cash flow game. Kristi takes us away with number 7.
The 7th reason you're not ready to scale is because you're mentally not prepared for bigger problems.
Kristi, that hurts so much.
Whether you're scaling and you're going from one single family to 50 single family, from one single family to an apartment complex or to development, what you're doing is you're leveling up. The game you were playing small ball, and now you're starting to get into the minor leagues and maybe the major leagues. That means you have to level up your CPA, your attorneys, because if you have more ways and more liabilities, you're going to get sued. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So you have to make sure that your strategic partners and the people on your team have leveled up with you. Your one-off handyman contractor now needs to probably be a licensed contractor who can come in and pull permits and get with an architect. When you start to have those bigger problems, Erik, you said it earlier, if you can't do that $50,000 check to the electrician and that just terrifies you to put out that kind of money, then you're not quite ready yet. Major lawsuits, major renovations, partnership disputes is another thing. The more you scale, the more partners you're going to have, and making sure that you set up those agreements properly at the front with what the roles and responsibilities are and the buy-sell agreements. That still doesn't solve when a partner gets divorced or I got laid off from my job. I want to sell some properties so I can just chill for a year. When it gets to that point, you're just going to have things that you're going to deal with by the sheer volume of your portfolio.
Well, we don't want you to be discouraged by our going through this. This is not the point. It's just to help you be ready for this, to have this in mind if it's a direction that you want to go. Now, as a recap here, and we'll have some closing thoughts, you need to have excellent systems in place. And now, before you scale, is the time to start thinking about that. Cash reserves. And I know that's backwards. We're saying you need to have some cash before you do this. And most people think like, well, I'm going to get the cash by scaling. And we're just warning.
If you play with fire, you're going to get burnt.
Yep. Having a strong team and network. And this is an important thing because your team, although it seems like it's going to cost you a lot of money, is absolutely essential, even though it does cost you a lot of money. As you scale up, those numbers will get bigger. And as the people get more specialized, they get more expensive. Just be aware of that. Be paying attention to your debt strategy. Understand money. Money is a tool. Money is a power saw. And when I took woodshop, our instructor was very, very adamant about our care around the table saw. And even after that, one of my classmates literally cut off his thumb. Anytime you are dealing with a powerful tool, there is the potential for it to be a very powerful, useful tool, and there is the potential to get very hurt. You need to pay attention to what you're doing with this, not get sloppy. So, money strategy. If you're still making rookie mistakes, If just all the things that you're doing, you're like, I'll fix that later. When I scale, then I will get these things all fixed. That's not the time to address it. If you're not sure what game you're playing, the tax game, appreciation game, value add game, stabilized wealth, or cash flow game, if you're just not sure what game there is that you're playing, or combination of those, then you're not ready to do it. Last is the mental space that it requires to do this. And I would propose that that's one of the most important things to get. And that grows as you struggle, but it's important to be thinking about that and be proactive before you jump into the scale. Kristi, what final thoughts you have, and then I'll close us out.
That it doesn't have to be chaotic to scale. Once you build that foundation, you can confidently walk into scaling your portfolio. Get one market stabilized with your team at a time, and then move to the next market and go deep in that one and move to the next one, go deep in that. And you can scale with confidence and you'll have peace of mind. You'll be able to sleep at night. That's when you know you're ready to move on.
Excellent. We're not saying don't scale. We're saying be careful as you scale. We're here to encourage you, to inform, maybe have you laugh a little bit. The highest compliment you could pay to us is share this episode with a friend. Share the podcast, post it on social media, and where you can, leave a review. We would love that. We want to help more people grow and even scale. Thanks for joining us on the Real Estate Pessimist Podcast, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing.